BTW, Curiosity in Maintenance. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance. I'm your host, Chris Karamonica. My guest today is Baris, who is a facilities director for Equity. In this conversation, Baris and I talk about our history together from our early days of him taking over a property for me, as well as his growth and curiosity through the maintenance industry, to where he's gotten to today, overseeing numerous high-rises in New York City and the surrounding market. Baris has a ton of experience. I've worked with him shoulder to shoulder and side by side for a number of years, and I was so pleased to have him as my guest. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this week's episode of Beyond the Work with Baris. And without further ado, here we go. Welcome to Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance. My name is Chris Karamonica. As a 15-plus year veteran in the apartment industry, I have stories to tell, a desire to hear and tell others' stories. As a multiple committee member for NAA, a CAMT advisory board member and a CAMT holder, and a national presenter and educator, I have met and worked with so many great people in our industry at all different levels. This is not going to be a how-to podcast. This is going to be a how-did podcast. We are going to explore the how-did tales in multifamily maintenance. How did we do it? How did we learn from it? How did we grow? How did we decide not to do it again? Join me as we go beyond the work. Baris, old friend, thank you for joining me so much today on Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Happy to be here, Chris.
So for our listening audience, I call Baris an old friend because we worked together many, many moons ago and spent a lot of late nights doing budgets together. We've spent a lot of days in boiler rooms and on rooftops and inspecting new construction buildings and some old construction buildings. So I'm so happy to have you on today. I know your story, but you have an interesting how you got into the business story. And, it's one of the reasons why I do this show is to hear these stories and share them. So tell us a little bit about your background and history and how you kind of got into the industry.
So before we get into my career, it's been 13 years. It was August 12th, 2012, when I started with the same company that you were working at that time. And you were
I was already there. Yeah.
Correct. You were leaving and I was replacing you at that property. So you were giving me the rundown for that huge property and I was lost.
That was which property was? I had so many properties when I was with Avalon Bay. What property was that?
Yves Nanuet and
Yves Nanuet.
Yes.
I vividly remember now. Those were two massive garden style, 60 acres. One of those buildings burnt down recently. I just saw in the news. Yeah, it's no longer an Avalon property. It was sold many years ago. But that was sad because I had a little piece of my heart. That was in my home county where I grew up too. So
of course.
But yeah, was it that you remember the exact day? All right.
Yeah, I do.
Enough reminiscing. So yes, you took over for me, and we've known each other since. But let's get into it. How'd you get here?
I came into the United States in 2001. Wasn't a great year for our nation, but I came as a student. So I started down in Savannah, Georgia, at a college, English as a second language student. Wanted to learn, the language, and the plan was to go back. And in mid-year, my family in Turkey, they couldn't afford the, money, and I didn't have the money. I went to school. I said, look, is there any job that I can do here? They said, we can get you a job in the library. So I started working in the library, and then I met with these Turkish guys in there, and then they were working in the hotel in Savannah, Georgia. And I'm like, like Savannah, like not New York, not, Miami or like big cities, like Savannah, Georgia, like 30,000 people, or I don't know how many, but so I one of them said like, "Hey, come, like, we can get you a job in the hotel." So I went to apply for a job, and they said, well, "What can you do? What's your previous experience?" I said, "I was a news producer in Turkey. I edited news, I edited videos and made news, and that was my job." And they said, "Oh, we don't have anything for you. We have a maintenance position open." And I said, "Look, we did like live broadcasts and stuff. I can run like low voltage cables and connect things, and like I know how to do that." They're like, "Okay, well, we'll give you a shot." I think they were desperate. I don't know. So
Oh, nobody's ever desperate to hire maintenance people, Baris. Why would you ever say that? Even 23, 24 years ago, nobody's ever been desperate to hire maintenance personnel.
Chris, I started as a maintenance technician in a hotel, making $5.30 an hour. And this is 2001, right? That's the minimum wage at that time at that location. But I realized that I have thing for picking up things very quick. So when I looked at things, they start making sense, right? I start looking at the mechanical systems, like it made sense. I see a pump running, it's pumping the water this way, and then this valve shuts it off, this diverts that way. So things start making sense, and I got very interested in like all of them. So I started working on like chronicle problems in that building. Like we were having like hot water, cold water mixing, and like the kitchen was complaining every day. They couldn't figure out. So I was the night guy. I would do all of my service tickets and everything, and then I would spend like hour and a half troubleshooting. Like why would that be? And then I will find like the dishwasher had a mixing valve in the faucet, and the cartridge was leaking from one side to the other, and the pressure was imbalanced. So the cold water feed into the hot water line all night. When they come in the morning, they need to empty all that cold water to get the hot water. So I'll solve those, and I would be like so happy and excited, right? I'm like, oh, I found it. Like, so it became like a passion, and then I started growing in my career. Like in a year they gave me like the supervisor position, and then 2003 they they said, "Do you want to run a hotel for us?" I'm like, "Where?" It's like, "In Long Island." I said, "Where is Long Island?" They said, "Up in New York." So I went to Long Island, New York, ran a Marriott there for 2 years, fixed the property, and then they started sending me over different properties. And every time they had a problem, Baris go fix it. Baris went there, fixed it, and then it turned into like, "Hey, we have a new property we just bought. We want you to go there and set up the standards and set up the new guys and all that." So then I start traveling throughout the entire East Coast for this company. That was like 11 years. And at one point, the company went through like some financial problems, and then they were selling their hotels. A couple of the hotels that I were in, they started selling them. And at that time, I decided to change the scenery and try to do something new. And that's when I jumped into the residential, right? And then spent 9 years with the residential with the big corporation, which was great years. And having you as a peer was a great. Did a couple of years in private, and then went back to my current role in a corporate company. And like now I oversee the New York market for them, about 35 properties, close to like 10,000 apartments. I do the entire facilities for them. The role is different than it used to be, that I'm used to. It's more like a support role than maintaining the entire maintenance portion. Yeah, that's my quick story from 2001 to here.
So, so you and I both started as in this industry as really maintenance managers, maintenance supervisors at pretty large properties in the New York City metro area. What is the difference between being and you just started to talk about it a little bit. What is for you? What's the biggest difference between being that on-site maintenance person who knows everything about the site, knows everything about the residents, to being in a director role where you have 2 dozen, 3 dozen properties. I have a lot of friends, myself included, that know just enough about the property or just enough about the residents, but they don't know it as intimately as we did when we were on site supervisors, and that's a big challenge. What are your feelings on that? And was that a real shift for you? Is it still a shift for you? Is probably a better question.
I think, Chris, in the beginning, it was a big shift because being hands-on and being very involved, like being in the weeds as a service manager, right, or a maintenance manager, is completely different. When I made the change from maintenance manager to the director role, it turned into, hey, I can't be doing the maintenance manager job anymore. Otherwise, I can't do my own job. So, in that point, you have to learn how to trust people, trust and verify, definitely, but trust people and believe that they're going to do the right thing. And you just need to lead them to the resolution. So once you have that feeling and you let go of the things that you've been holding on to that made you successful because you were in it, you were doing it, you were checking it, you were verifying it by yourself. So once you let that go, it becomes easier. So I think that's the biggest difference right now for me. I'm not connected with the residents directly, not as much as I used to. Here and there, like I get involved when I'm helping the site teams to troubleshoot something. I'm in the residents' apartments, but other than that, I need to rely on the managers on site to give me the insight, and I can direct them, help them find a solution, whatever the problem that they're dealing with.
Yeah, I experienced the same things, but much like you and I are cut from the same cloth. Even, I was telling you before we started today, I ran to a site to really get my eyes on a situation where I kind of knew what the answer was, and I had some information, but I still needed to see it, touch it, feel it myself. And in director roles, we can't do that all the time, right? That is,
No, no.
that's a huge challenge. But every once in a while, we do like to get out from behind the desk or, get into that boiler room, get into that basement, get onto that roof because we have to.
Look, don't get me
We're
wrong.
tactile
Don't get me
people.
wrong. There are things that I feel that is important, right? I don't wanna make any mistake on this one. So I feel like, okay, this is important. I need to be there personally, right? And then there are days that I miss those old days and I see a mystery that I want to solve. So
Yeah,
like
it's the
it
mystery.
intrigues my interest, right? So if I can make time to be there to solve that, I will make it, I will make it there and then I'll help them out and troubleshoot together, unplug things, plug things, turn valves off, turn valves on, figure things out. But we can't do it with everything. You're right. I can't be there for everything. Otherwise, like I said, my time is consumed on the sites, and as you grow in your career, the admin portion of the job becomes like itself is like an 8-hour job.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And one of the things that I see in maintenance professionals in general is an inquisitive nature. I mean, your story of how you got into the, you took a job as a maintenance technician to hotels, and your inquisitive nature on how things worked or how could you fix things or how could you make things better. And for me, that's one of my favorite parts of the job is troubleshooting, is doing that inquisitive, having that inquisitive nature to say, how does this work? Why does this work? And not just theory. And I think a lot of maintenance professionals do that. How, in this current environment, with the lack of skilled maintenance professionals that we're seeing in every industry, but our industry definitely, how do you instill that inquisitive nature that we have, and it's so many of us that have been in the industry a long time? Are you able to get that inquisitive nature to teach it to somebody new? Or is it one of those things that you think that they either have it or they don't?
Honestly, Chris, that's going back to the hiring process, right? When we hire people, I am looking for that person that has the curiosity. So if I feel that spark, that this person is curious. I ask simple questions. I ask like, hey, there is a machine in the boiler room and you don't know what it does, and how would you figure out? Simple question. I just want to know your thought process. Some says I look at what's inside, I look at the pipes coming in, coming out. And one says like I look at the label and find the company online and see what it is, and then look at the manual. I'm like, okay, I like this guy. I want to talk to this guy, right?
So when I got in a, and I on a previous on my last episode, I interviewed Kelly Brown at BGSF Staffing, and we talked about hiring and recruiting at length. But when I got into the facility business, and a little bit of my backstory, as do my listeners, when I got into the theater business in New York City, it was as a facilities manager job, right? I was a facilities manager for Broadway theater houses, and the director of operations pulled out a green cigar box, a little plastic green cigar box about this big, and I still have it to this day. And she opened it up and started pulling things out of the box. And she said, "What is this?" She held up a sprinkler head. "What is this?" She held up a manifold. She held up a check valve. She held up a radiator valve. And it was just random things that she had collected from within these buildings. And she looked at me and asked me what each of those, some of them I knew, sprinkler head is a sprinkler head. You can there were things in the box that I had never seen. But I would explain it to her and say, well, it has this, or it's copper, so it probably delivers water, and explained it in such a way. And that really came back to me when I was talking to Kelly last week. And it's something that I'm personally going to do, and especially after our conversation today, is kind of reinvigorate that with people that I'm talking to or interviewing. Is that what I'm going to call it, the cigar box test? Because a lot of times we ask either our current staff members or prospects that are interviewing with us, how do you wire a three-way switch? Instead of actually handing them it, right? Or showing them, where would you put the wires on this? Where would you put the wires on this load side of a GFI?
Yeah.
I want to see what he's going to say. Does it go on the silver? Does it go on the gold? Does it go on the top? Does it go on the bottom? So I think that is an inquisitive nature. That curiosity is something that really needs to be looked at in the interview process, because I'll take that over somebody that's been doing plumbing for 5 years. I really will. I want somebody that can figure it out and learn, because that's how I did it.
No, I agree with you. And then the second part of it is, Chris, that if I find the right person and if he's hired, I have monthly training sessions. So I pick a part of the building, I train my staff on that. For example, next month we're looking at the water towers. How is it filled up? What fills it up? Why do we need a water tower? Why can't we just pump the water up? The whole background and mentality of having this. I put these training sessions on the certain part of the buildings. I do boilers, rooftops, P-tax. No, I think he's 2.5 and he's having the terrible twos. So I put these training sessions to make sure that I give him fundamental, knowledge than how these systems work. So that does one thing. That makes them being courageous about work, getting their hands dirty. I see people that are scared to touch things because they don't know anything about it. So if they have some understanding and fundamental information about the systems, they can start touching things. And then I show them, hey, you can bypass it. You can put it on auto. You can put it on VFD. So VFD does the speed up, slow down depending on what you use. So once they understand those, now they have the curiosity. Now they have little knowledge, and then they can start building on top of it. So I think that's working for me at the moment. And I want to say, I have a great team, and we've been hiring lately, those type of individuals that they want to grow, they want to learn. So it's been successful. So I have to say I have a great team, and I think that's the only way that we can stay well informed and like keep on learning and build our talent, you know, bench strength. Otherwise, like you said, like in nowadays, it's really hard to find people that everybody wants to, you know, swipe. Nobody wants to twist the screwdriver anymore.
Yeah, and we have to do, as there are less and less of us of a certain age in this industry, we have to pass that knowledge down to the people who are here, the people who are showing up, or it's going to be lost. It's going to be, maintenance in general is unfortunately becoming a lost art, but apartment maintenance and building maintenance for the types of assets that we oversee is going away. So I love that you get out to the sites and you provide shoulder to shoulder training and focus on one different aspect. I think that a lot of people go, oh, there's just so much to do, but you're doing it in a really smart, thoughtful way. Okay, we're going to do cooling tower, we're going to do the water towers, and we're going to go over the pumps. And in teaching somebody just that, you're actually teaching them a whole bunch of other things, because they can go look at other pumps that run similarly. They can look at other float switches that operate similarly. And I think it's just like, oh, there's just too much here for us to do. We don't have time to train.
And I think you have a very good point. Like I think I don't know if this is generational thing or not, but they get surprised. Like we go into a site and I see the cooling tower. There's a leak. Is dripping, and I'm like, let's open up the site. I'm like, what? I'm like, yeah, let's turn it off. Open up the side panel, see if your floats are, working right. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, let's open it up. I'll show you. So and then I show it to him. Like, this is nothing different than your toilet. It's the same float system.
Right.
It's just bigger.
It's just bigger. It does the exact same thing.
Oh, yeah. We're like, okay, this is not working fine. You need to replace it, but let's bend it down a little bit so we can stop the water a little earlier, or we can adjust it, And then they get like, I see their face like they're shocked. I'm like, why are you opening this? Why are you doing it?
Because like, nobody's ever taken the time, or they've gotten so used to calling the contractor who's going to charge you $1,000 to bend the little ball cock on the float valve, on the fill valve, right? That was an easy solution.
I think the other thing that I do, I don't know, is this a mean thing or not, but this is for them, honestly. When they call me for a problem, my first question is like, what have you done so far? He's like, my cooling tower is not working. I'm like, okay, give me some details. What is not working? The fan is not kicking. Okay, what did you do so far? If you tell me that you don't even have a meter and you didn't check your power, or you didn't check your fuses, you didn't check your VFD, you didn't look at anything, and you just pick up the phone, call me, there's a problem there. You need to do at least some work before you call me, right? So
yes.
I push back. I'm like, okay, what do you think we should do? I don't give them an answer. I challenge them. I'm like, oh, I don't know. Maybe there's no power. I'm like, okay, let's get your meter and just go check the power to see if you're receiving power. And then I ask the follow-up question, like, do you know where to check it? And if he says, oh, I don't know where to check it, I'm like, okay. And then it's a different conversation. But, you need to give them a starting point and have them start troubleshooting. Otherwise, they'll never learn.
Yeah, and I talk to my friend and fellow podcast host Paul Rhodes about this all the time, is that I think the first thing that every maintenance technician should have to prove to know how to use is a multimeter. Learn how, I need every maintenance team member, and he's got me to be a real advocate of that with my teams, is, show me how to test for resistance. Show me how to test for voltage. Show me how to test for continuity. Just 3 things. If you can show me those 3 things, I can teach you how to troubleshoot anything that has an electron flow. I can.
It's a simple device too, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
If you can use your iPhone, you can definitely use a multimeter.
Right. Exactly. And it's only a matter of time before there's an app that you're going to be able to, have on a multimeter app that you just have to like Bluetooth in your leads or something into your phone, right? We know some people that'll be first in line to purchase that too, but I definitely would trust an old school multimeter. So I want to shift gears a little bit. You oversee some extremely large buildings. You've done it in the hotel industry, and by large, I mean high rises. And they have their own sets of problems. So I want to cover two things. One of them will be fairly quick. One of them might be a little bit more in depth. But when you are dealing with a large high-rise style building, 15, 20, 40 stories, I've had all three of those. You may have some larger. It's capital planning because you have equipment that is really big equipment, just like in your example, large cooling tower, large boiler systems. That's not servicing just one resident. It's serving dozens, if not hundreds of apartments. So I don't want to go down the route of preventive maintenance, because if everything is going right and you're maintaining your equipment, but there is time, especially as our product ages and our equipment ages, that we have to really start thinking about being proactive in our capital planning, replacing the chiller, replacing a cooling tower. Is that something that you are intimately involved in your role?
Yes and no. It is. We definitely have a construction department that does
Okay.
the 5-year, 10-year planning, but we do have a capital walk every year. So that's being done with our investment officers, who acts like the owner, right? He decides what to sell, what to buy in the market. And then we have the construction department, that the VP of construction, that walks with me. And then we walk the property from top to bottom. This is not only about the equipment. This is also anything that the residents touch as well, right? So your FF&E, for example, your furniture in the club lounge, or your
Gym equipment.
gym equipment, or anything that resident experience in that building. So, like you said, everything that moves and works, that has a lifetime. So I think we do a pretty good job tracking our assets and equipment, because I have a data from like 10 years, from like how many PTACs
Wow.
that I purchased, how many PTACs I have in each building, and my replacement ratio every year, like compared to what I have in total. It tells me like in how many years I'll be going through the entire building, replacing the whole thing, right? So that helps me with the small stuff. Like the PTACs are small stuff. It's still capital expenditure, but small stuff. And then you have the big stuff like the boilers, like the cooling towers. And then those have been there since the building has been built. So if you think about like a big steam boiler, the lifetime for those is like 30 years to 50 years, right?
Yeah, 30 to 50, depending on, yeah.
So depending on the type and the maintenance, we don't want to go down into the rabbit hole.
Yeah, we're not going to go in
But
that rabbit hole today.
but also the conditions, right? The boilers in Jersey are different than boilers in New York. You have hard water, scaling is like almost like crazy in Jersey, like everything scales up so quick. And either you have to have different type of filters and water treatment system. If you're not doing it, then your lifetime goes like 50% down. So I think with those, what we do, we put them in the 5-year, 10-year plan. We look at the equipment. We look at the age of the equipment. What's the life expectancy? If it's going to be in the next 5 year or 10 year. But nowadays, there is another factor in the calculations, because now you have your local law 97
So
energy
this is what I
conservation.
wanted. This is the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about, because, you're in New York City. I have properties in New York City as well as, other states. But I wanted to talk about energy conservation and decarbonization. So you just started to say before, and I apologize for cutting you off, local law 97. And for my audience, the New York City has laws. I guess every place has laws. That was a weird thing to say, but has specific laws that are issued every year for building improvement, multifamily, the city at large. And what Baris just started to reference is Local Law 97, which is all about energy conservation and decarbonization. we're not just seeing that in New York, we're seeing that in many other states. And if it's not in your state yet, it's probably going to be coming in the very near future. So, Baris, walk us through what New York City is currently doing, specifically for multifamily, because it's not just a multifamily they're doing it for, but how is it affecting you and your assets?
So let's talk about the whole Local Law 97 and what it is, and in a nutshell, right? So it started with Local Law 84, which is benchmarking and energy grading
Which
for the
many
buildings.
which many states and jurisdictions started to do after New York City.
So basically, what they do, they look at your square footage, right? And then they look at your utility consumptions, your gas consumption, your electricity consumption, your oil consumption. And then they look at similar properties. So if you're a multi-family mixed use property with the retail component, depending on your square footage and the height and the complexity of your building, you fit into one category, and they look at the bucket and they look at the average and they build a curve. So they say, okay, in average, these buildings are using this much utility per square foot. And then they look at your particular building and where you fall. If you're below the curve, your square footage consumption is lower than the others, then you're in good shape. If you're above the curve, then you're using too much. So you're not efficient or something is wrong with your property. So they set these thresholds, which became the Local Law 97. So the first phase started in this year, 2025 till 2030. And they set up these benchmarks and the thresholds for each property. If your property is not performing or above that threshold, you get some hefty fines. I'm talking about like hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's not like 5,000, 6,000, above $100,000. And then this is for every year, not only one-time fee. So if you think about it, you're getting fined $100,000 because of an inefficient system, and you have to do it 5 times in 5 years. This is $500,000. So basically, they're forcing you to put that money in investment of your equipment, improve your efficiency, and lower your cost, so you don't have to pay the fines and get nothing in return.
Yeah,
So
and
that's
one of
Local
the
Law
issues.
97.
Yeah, and one of the issues that I have with, I'm all for energy conservation. I think one of the first projects I did at Yves Nanuet all those years ago was changed out all of the streetlights from metal halide to LED.
I remember that.
And the reason that I bring that up is because before I say the next thing, I want people to know I believe in sustainability efforts. I believe in green conservation. But as an operator, it's forced compliance with measures that may be difficult for a property to ever attain, right? So to get your property above the curve, there's certain things that you have to do or prove that you can do. And then there's just some things that you can't. Could you make upgrades to a building envelope? Yeah. But the cost may far exceed the fines. Do you repipe an entire building with a steam system to put in a low condensing boiler? So that's some of the problems that I have with some of the green sustainability measures, is that owners and operators don't necessarily have the correct asset to put it in, nor do they have the necessary money and funds needed to do these kinds of very deep retrofits, and especially older product in New York City that is pre-war or even older. Have you experienced that?
Yeah,
You're smiling like you've
think,
experienced that.
no,
or do you disagree with me?
Look, I agree with you, not disagreeing with you, but I think I've been really involved with Local Law 97. This is like 4th year now. I've been in many seminars, workshops. Like I was in a workshop last week with NYSERDA with the PTAC manufacturers. Like Island Air was there, Ice Air was there, Daikin was there, like Mitsubishi was there. We've been talking about brainstorming how to convert these properties from steam or hydronic heating to, low ambient heat
Electric
pumps.
heat pumps. Yeah.
So I think I do believe the efficiency is decentralizing the systems. If you're producing heat to every apartment, whether they need or not, with a centralized system, you're running your boilers nonstop. The moment that you stop doing that and give control to the residents on their own unit, and they can turn it on and off as they please, then you're more efficient because you're not providing a heat for somebody who likes being at 70 degrees.
It
So
balances out, right?
one thing is that. The other thing is like we've been brainstorming about the hydronic coils. Can they be turned into your condenser line and turn those units to water source heat pumps? We've been thinking about air-cooled heat pumps, the defrost cycle. If it's a steam system, can you use the steam line as your drain line so you can dump that water into the drain line where you can't dump it outside on the street, right? So there are like, people are thinking about these things. In one property, actually, particularly, I was talking to an engineer. I didn't have a steam system. I had PTAX with the gas burners. I don't know why, but the Williamsburg, in one point, like everybody started putting those like gas burners, PTAX in the apartments. Whose great idea was that? I don't know, but it's all over the place. So you can't use hydronic lines or the steam lines because you don't have them. Your heat source is gas, right? So I was asking the engineer, like, if I can take my stove out and put an electric stove in there, that's my only other gas source in the apartment, and then take my PTAC out, put an air-cooled heat pump in there, can I use the gas line as a drain line, right? After I decommission it. Like, there are crazy ideas out there. People are working on them. And I'm sure that we'll find a solution for every particular incident. But like you said, when these forced measures with the time constraint is making it really difficult. And my concern is like people are going to start taking shortcuts and then create these like elaborate, complicated, convoluted systems that is one will work with something and then it's going to be really hard to understand what anything does.
Yeah, and for me, it's whenever these measures come out, any kind of conservation measure, for me, it's about longevity, right? We know the boilers and the pumps and the systems that we've had for years are working. To meet energy efficiency guidelines that many jurisdictions are requiring, not just New York City, you have to put in newer technology. And we don't know the long-term ramifications of that on operations and maintenance, right? We don't know what the true usable life of this equipment is, because in some cases it's brand new technology, or it's not as, and brand new could be 10 years old, right? In our world, brand new could be the last decade it came out. When LED lights came out, everyone's like, oh, they're going to last for 10 years. There's not one person who is listening to this. There's not one maintenance professional who hasn't changed an LED light fixture, at least one, in year one of operation, right?
Yep.
But when it came out, that was the selling point. You're never going to have to change. It will not go bad. The LEDs will not go bad for 10 years. That is not the case. But we saw that with the lighting boom. Now, granted, lighting technology has come a long way since 15 years ago, when it really, the first wave of LED lights came out. They do have much longer lives now. And yes, there are plenty of lighting options out there that do last that 10 years. I'm talking about that initial wave of new technology that everybody was flooding the market with. Buy this $30 light fixture. It's going to last you for 10 years and cut your operations costs for 10 years.
But that's for everything, Chris. I mean, look around you. How many Teslas you see? Like, they're everywhere now, right?
Yeah, definitely by where I live, there's lots of Teslas and Cybertrucks too.
Electric cars, like, people were like very iffy about it. And now they're everywhere.
I personally went, again, back to, I love energy conservation. I went electric last year. It's been a year. Actually, today, the day of this recording, is when I went electric, and I would personally, I would never go back. I'm a city commuter. It works for me. I'm able to, personally use that as my driving car. But yeah, I love it. And like I said, I married into LED technology and energy conservation 15 years ago. It's just I'm seeing now that it's become more of a problem for us, for the operators.
Well, I think that's the cycle of things, Chris. If I be totally honest with you, somebody's gonna have the lead, right? And that person is gonna start giving the feedback saying that this doesn't work or deal with the failures and then report back, and then the bugs are gonna be fixed, and then the technology is gonna get better and better, and then the switch is gonna happen. I see it's happening already. It's gonna be painful, it's gonna be difficult, but we're gonna learn along the way. We're gonna give feedback and they're gonna fix it, hopefully, and then it's going to get better. So I see that this energy conservation and decarbonization is not going away. It's going to
So
happen.
it is going to happen, and there's things that let's have a little call to action here as we start to wrap up our time together. The time flew. You and I,
Yes.
could. There's no question you and I can talk forever. And we've had some late nights in our career together. We talked about a lot of the bigger things, right? We were talking about replacing PTACs and boilers and pumps. And, you mentioned VFDs a little earlier, which is a great energy conservation measure, when you have a system that will use it. But I think that there's a lot of things that people can do today to start those efforts now, right? So I'm going to throw one out there, and then, I'm thinking small measures that a site can do as part of their capital planning or just on a turn, which is, so I'm going to throw out one: low flow shower heads, right? It really reduces they provide the same amount of pressure, a low flow water head. They're lower maintenance. They definitely use less water, and the residents don't necessarily notice it, but it also saves you money on the heating. Because if you're using less hot water, you have less water to heat. So you're saving on your electricity and you're saving on your water. What are some measures that either you've instituted or that you know of in all of your experience that people could start doing today, planning for or doing on turns?
Chris, I started a few things. There were a few things it's been already happening when I arrived to this role. Like every turn, we would turn the temperature settings in the fridge down to minimum. Empty fridge, you don't have to cool it down. We will lift up the ice maker so it's not making ice. And then we would do the same thing for HVAC units, set the temperatures in the apartments. When they're sitting vacant, you have to be really mindful about how much you spend in
Making
that
sure
apartment.
making sure blinds are closed and actually closed to reduce the heat from coming from the outside from the sun.
Correct. So then we expanded this to our common areas, right? My common areas, we started installing smart thermostats with the scheduling on it, and the schedule matches the operation of the particular space. So if the space is closed at 10 o'clock, my AC stops working at 10 o'clock. If the space is open at 6 a.m. in the morning, my AC kicks in at 5:30 to bring it to a comfortable temperature. And the latest thing that I added, two things: that one is my mixing valves in the buildings. The funny thing that you're talking about the hot water. I adjust my domestic hot water schedule. You have a range from the city between 120 to 128, right? So in the peak times, between 6 and 10 in the morning and between 5 and 10 at night, I set it to 128. Off peak times, I set it to 120. So that 8 degrees saves you so much money, you have no idea. And then the last thing is the common areas. We're installing this year the sensors on the doors and the windows. So they are interlocked with the AC units. So if somebody opens my window in the summer to get fresh air, I'm not cooling New York City. I'm just going to shut down my AC. So same thing for the summer. If somebody's opening the window in the club lounge, I'm not pumping heat in that space because apparently either it's hot or somebody wants to get fresh air, and there is no point of heating that space. So those are the things that we're doing. Little things, but at the end they add up, I think, to help you get 1 point, 2 point on your energy grading,
Yeah, and
Everything
I like,
counts.
going back to lighting, I like occupancy sensors in trash rooms and in back of house areas, right? Because the maintenance professionals are much like my wife and daughter. They never turn the lights out when they leave a room. I've been installing those, the sensors for your common area stairwells or breezeways. So, when there's motion, that's when those lights go on. Even though, a lot of people have gone to more energy efficient lighting like LED or fluorescent before that, it's still energy usage. And by using occupancy sensors in those areas that people don't really go to or only need to be on when there's motion, I have owners who have put it in their common area hallways that the minute a door opens anywhere in the hallway, much like that you would see in a storage facility, that as you walk down the hallway, you could see it. If you've never been in a storage facility, I'm sure you've seen a movie where somebody's been walking down the hallway and lights just start coming on. We actually have that in some of our common, we actually have that in some of our in some of my buildings in New York City. They actually are phased that way. That the minute they start, they open up a door, the light outside their door goes on, and then it follows them all the way to the elevator, and they go off as you get further and further away. But these are really low cost.
That's a security measure too. You know that?
Yeah.
Like if somebody's down the hall hiding, you will see that the light is moving, and you know that there's somebody in there.
Absolutely, it's a good security measure. It's a great security measure in your stairwells as well. If the lights are out and they think they're going to hide, and the minute they walk in there, the lights go on. Yep. Oh, am I being watched? Oh, somebody's going to know that I'm here, right? Did a camera come on too? So yeah, I think there's a lot of little measures like that properties and owners can actually save money. And all it is making one little change to your operation. It's buying that low flow fixture. It's buying that $20 sensor for your air conditioning unit, or that might save you, $100 a year in a utility cost. And I think a lot of people are going that way, and definitely cities and states are going that way, and we have to be at the forefront of that.
And there's a lot of new tech out there, Chris. I have to say, like new boiler controllers, new cooling tower controllers, like they will blanket over your current system and take over and manage it in a much efficient way, especially in the shoulder seasons, to clip the tip, all those like peak times that you don't have to run your boiler 100%. So there is like really good technology out there, and we've been piloting left and right, and we see some results, like really good results. All of my properties right now is meeting the threshold, which is, great. A couple of properties we have we need to do some work. We're right on the fence for the second phase, but I think as the technology gets better and the tech gets better, hopefully structurally we're able to do some changes. Like you said, some properties really hard to make a change from one pipe system steam building pre-war. I mean, how much can you do in that property, right, to get off the steam? But I think there will be a solution for each scenario. It's just going to require some time and some work.
Well, Baris, as we're winding down, is there anything else you want to talk about or share with our listening audience today?
No, I mean, I would say stay curious, mess with things, be safe, but, it's all about learning new things.
Thank you so much, Baris. Baris, thank you so much for joining me on Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance, powered by the Multifamily Media Network. Listeners, thank you so much for joining, and hope you like, subscribe, and come back again for another episode of Beyond the Work. Thank you again, Baris.
It was a pleasure, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for this episode. No matter how long you've been in our industry, or what position you have at your company or your community, everyone has a maintenance story to tell. Go to www.multifamilymedianetwork.com and leave me a voice message. or share your information and we can tell your tale together on a future episode. Please check out our sponsors and like, subscribe, and follow to this podcast or video, and join the Multifamily Media News Network newsletter for upcoming shows and blogs from me and the other great hosts on our network. Our stories all connect us. See you for the next chapter.